Trump's tariffs are upending the global order. Many say they're stupid, crazy. But could this be waking up the world to a new geopolitical reality? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Say, that's a nice international economic world order you've got there. Be a real shame if something happened to it. Yes, President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs seem largely to have liberated boomers from their 401k. The usual experts are saying Trump's tariffs are destroying the economy. They'll cause economic havoc. Americans are going to pay more for everyday basics. Recession is being thrown around a lot. And this isn't even just criticism from the left. Even conservatives are getting nervous, especially the boomers. The National Review is calling tariffs reckless. Ted Cruz says it could be terrible for America. And former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence's Advancing American Freedom calls it a tax on American consumers. So it's very easy to think that Trump might just be insane. I'm not here to disagree with that, but critics say that Trump's tariff formula makes no economic sense, that there is no economic rationale. It horrifies economists. It's incoherent and pointless. A surefire loser. Incredibly stupid. But is there any rationale for what Trump is doing? Why tariff so much, especially allied countries and penguins? So I'm going to do my best to steelman the arguments for these tariffs. That doesn't mean these tariffs are a good thing or Trump's plan will even work. I think we could all just benefit from understanding where Trump is coming from, beyond Orange Man bad. The issue is we don't have free trade. Countries around the world use tariffs, unfair labor practices, currency manipulation, government subsidies, and intellectual property theft to gain an unfair advantage over the U.S. And no country is more guilty of that than China. The tariffs are more than just Trump trying to resolve trade surpluses and revive U.S. manufacturing. This is actually about China and decoupling the U.S. and the rest of the world from it. These tariffs are about setting a new Iron Curtain and putting an end to a global order that China's benefiting from. It's full-on Cold War in all but name. The biggest indicator of this is the enormity of tariffs on China directly. When you take into account duties Trump has already imposed, China doesn't face a 34% tariff. Instead, it faces a 54% one. And that's not including Trump ending the de minimis exception for China, which allowed shipments of cheap Chinese crap from Temu and Shein to come in duty-free. If you watch my twin brother Chris Chappell over at China Uncensored, you also know that Trump wants to charge any Chinese-made ship as much as $1.5 million per port call. So all that might explain the tariffs on China, but what about the penguins? It still goes back to China. According to Henry Gao, a professor at Singapore Management University, Trump's likely using tariffs to get every country to set explicit anti-China provisions. These provisions could include binding commitments to restrict engagement with China across trade, investment, and technology. There's a reason why Vietnam, as well as a whole bunch of Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, got hit with higher tariffs than most countries, some reaching above 40%. It's not because Trump watched Platoon and thought, I'll show you Vietnam. These countries are used for transshipments or for redirecting goods to get around U.S. tariffs and sanctions. Ever since Trump's first term in office, Chinese investors and manufacturers have been moving to Vietnam and other countries to sell cheap Chinese goods from outside of China. Looking at this graph from Reuters, is it a mere coincidence that increased U.S. imports from Vietnam go hand in hand with Vietnam imports from China? There's a good chance made in Vietnam may actually be made in China in disguise. A cheap, crappy Temu quality disguise. Trump's tariffs could force these countries and others to start rejecting Chinese transshipments or impose tariffs of their own against Chinese goods. This would be a serious blow to China's foreign direct investment and exports, not to mention its influence over other countries. Seeing things from an anti-China angle could explain the higher tariffs against countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, South Africa, Serbia, Madagascar, as well as more developed economies like Japan, South Korea, and even the EU. All of them have been drawing closer to China and or importing more from it in recent years. Or at the very least, prefer to stay neutral with China, even if it invades Taiwan. So this feels less like idiocy and more like an intervention. All that's missing is Trump staging an intervention with these countries. Your China addiction is affecting us all. But critics say Trump's tariffs are pushing allies away from the U.S. and closer to China. Vox News says Trump's tariffs could help China. The Wall Street Journal says Trump's tariffs are a strategic gift to China. And The Economist says the tariffs will make China great again, which would be impressive since that would mean Trump did in 2 months what the CCP couldn't do in ever. Critics point to how Europe's weighing closer economic ties with China. And there were even news reports about China, Japan, and South Korea jointly responding to U.S. tariffs. Wait, what's that, Shelley? Oh, this is just from a Chinese social media post by an account affiliated with Chinese state media. And both South Korea and Japan denied that they were joining forces with China. This is why relying on more than one source is important, folks. Anyways, could countries get so angry with the U.S. that they'll just run into China's arms? Well, things aren't so simple. Shifting exports to China is not a real option for most countries. The global trading system depends on the U.S. being a net importer, or importing more than it exports. The U.S. is the market for all the world's stuff. But China isn't a consumer economy. Sure, China has a large consumer market, but unlike the U.S., China mostly imports to manufacture and export cheap Chinese products back to consumer markets like the U.S. That's by design. This allows China to dominate entire industries like the drone and green energy markets and make the world more dependent on it, even if it's financially unfeasible. China does not want a consumer-driven economy because that would mean giving up state control. They're cutting off their nose to spite their face, which is still preferable to cutting off other people's noses in their organ harvesting schemes. China depends on exports to survive. Trump's massive tariffs threaten that. Without the U.S., China would have to flood other places like Europe with its exports, and their markets just can't absorb that. And it could also cause a backlash. The EU has been fighting hard to stop the flood of Chinese EVs. If China has to replace the U.S. market with the EU market, it would be a catastrophe. But ever since Trump launched his first trade war against China, the experts have been warning us that China wins a trade war. This article from 2018 was written by an expert with the Peterson Institute for International Economics. And up until 2018, they were taking money from Huawei, the Chinese telecom company with close ties to the Chinese military. Part of the reason we're in this mess is because of experts who told us that free trade with China would be good for the U.S. economy. And even though sending U.S. manufacturing to China gutted entire towns in the U.S., stocks went up, GDP looked good, even as the American working class lost everything and got addicted to Chinese fentanyl. I'm sure they're really broken up by what's happening to the stock market right now. Oh no, the richest 500 people lost $500 billion in 2 days? Meanwhile, those like Rand Paul push the belief that the more we trade, the less we fight. How'd that work out for the Ukrainians? And for that matter, how has all that trade with China worked out? China has hijacked the globalized world order to expand its political influence, rapidly develop its military capabilities, terrorize its neighbors, and tighten its stranglehold over global supply chains and infrastructure, all in exchange for us getting slightly cheaper and lower quality Chinese products. Trade wars do hurt, but not nearly as much as free trade with a hostile foreign power that's weaponized its economy to destroy the U.S. But what do you think about Trump's tariffs? Don't worry, we won't tariff you for posting your opinions. Leave your comments below. And episodes like this require a lot of time and research. Please support more episodes by subscribing to our new premium website, AmericaUncovered.tv. And you'll also get exclusive content, live streams, and more. Just click on this button that's been on the screen. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching America Uncovered.